Hey there everyone! So I'm back on the camera, yay! All the stress of November is over for the moment and I'm not quite into the stress of December yet. First things first, newsflash, I won NaNoWriMo! Yay! That was my very first NaNoWriMo and my very first attempt at creating a full-length work of fiction, and I am really proud of myself. So hopefully I will continue to work on that and get it completed, edited, all that good stuff for publishing at some point early 2017. But I have some other projects that I want to complete and get working on before that, for the transition to the new year. So I will be telling you all about that. For this video, I wanted to jump straight into one of my all-time favorite topics that I just never get enough of, and one of the things that I look at the most on YouTube, which is my Book of Shadows. Specifically, I love Book of Shadows flip-throughs. I always watch them, and unfortunately, the last time I looked it up, it would appear that I have already watched the vast majority of them. I'm having a difficult time finding videos on Books of Shadows that I haven't already seen. Therefore, and because I promised it earlier and did not get to it for November, I am going to show you my Book of Shadows as it stands right now. I did a brief overview a long time ago, a while back, on a video. I can link to that as well, but I didn't really do a flip through at that point. I just showed how it was organized. And what I'm going to show you today is still very disorganized, but I'm going to share with you, after showing you what's in my Book of Shadows, what I'm planning for my book in the coming year. So, without further ado, let me go grab my notebook and I'll be right back. Okay, here we are, and hopefully for Christmas I will figure out some way to fix this tripod situation that I complain about every time. But this is my current notebook of shadows. This is not what I want as the permanent end result. However, it is a very good means for me right now to add, delete, organize, etc. This is a standard binder. It's, as far as I can tell, I think it's a 2-inch rings, and it is pretty thick, but I will give the caveat that about half of what's in here, is gonna get ditched. I'll tell you about that in a little bit when I get to it. I believe I also already pointed out the tabs. These on the side here are my blots, my sabbats. And then at the top I have different sections for different things, and most of these at this point are obsolete and I need to redo them. I just have not decided on how I want to do that. So let's take a look inside. Over here I just have some random stickies and notes and things that I know I want to work with that were not big enough to put over here. I do have my little memorial dealio from my grandfather's funeral. I will be putting that in my my official Book of Shadows. And this was, see, this is how I work normally. I research stuff, I look stuff up as it comes to me. I have notes on the computer there, on my, I need to stop saying on, what is it, it's not Notepad. Some note-taking thing on the computer that I can just print web pages to, and then when I get around to it in my Book of Shadows, I go back, I look at it, I take notes, I mess around with it, I write what I want to write, and then I delete the old notes. I don't keep that stuff. This is an example of something I want to work with. There is, hand design here of a rune tattoo that I would like to get, actually one for each wrist. And I've had this in my head for a long time. I haven't done it yet because I want to do it with my brother, and he lives in Oregon, so we just haven't figured it out yet. But I am planning out a page for my Book of Shadows that explains the runes and the tattoo itself. So hopefully that will happen at some point. And then we go into the regular part of the Book of Shadows, in my case, the Galdra book. Now, what I wanted to point out for my book, the reason I do this a little bit differently, as said, I love looking at other people's books of shadows and how they've set them up, but the vast majority of them that I've seen are giant reference books. Basically, people have printed out or copied out information that they've gotten from someplace else and pasted it into their Book of Shadows. And that's perfectly fine and legitimate. There's nothing wrong with that. That's how all Books of Shadows got started initially with covens, was copying down the information from the coven. However, I am not really at that point anymore with my information, and that is why the back half of this stuff needs to go. The back half is, I don't know if you remember from my other video, I had an old notebook, an old binder that had information from when I was in the military coven and when I first started out with witchcraft. And so there is a lot of that copied stuff, printed out stuff in there that some of it doesn't relate anymore, and I just don't want to keep it. That's not what I'm doing with my book. So what I am doing with my book is trying to keep it as personal as possible. I have a makeshift dashboard here because whenever I have random thoughts and ideas, I wind up writing it down on a sticky, and then I've just stuck it here. I have a book blessing that I wrote, and I am also I want to include a book charge or a book calling, something to basically enliven the book. This is protecting the book, but I want the book to have the feel of more of a living, breathing part of my practice. So I'm going to add something for that. I just haven't done it yet. And then here I have For the Briar Rose, which is a collection of 4 short poetic stanzas written by William Morris. They each have actually very beautiful artwork associated with them. And I have this in here for its association with my magical name. So I have it in there for that. This is one of those items that I have from the old folder, which I actually really like this one and would like to copy it out and keep it. It is the story of creation told from a pagan standpoint. So I like this one. I like how it's written, and I'll keep that. This is notes basically from a energy circle, and in which I wound up taking a walk with my grandmother and my insights from that, and I just put it in front here because I'm not sure yet where I want to put this. This would actually fall into what I consider energy or shamanic type of work, which in the ancestry tradition would delve more into cedar instead of galder. And I'm still working out how I'm going to differentiate that. So this will eventually go there. And then I have a copy of my birth chart. And because I think it's cute, all the generalities associated with that about my personality. So I am going to use my chart in my Book of Shadows as a personal element, and I may or may not do something with this information. Next off, I have my ancestral chart. There are several pages in here, and it's a work in progress. I am trying to put together my family history, my genealogy chart, and here it is. So this chart itself will probably not be, once I get it more complete, once I get as far back as I can and continue working on this, this will not be a part of my actual Book of Shadows because I anticipate this to take up a lot of space. what I do want to include in my Book of Shadows is a list, probably 1 page each, of as close as I can get to the past 10 generations, 1 name each generation. That's a lofty goal. That's going back a far way, but basically listing the mothers and on the other page the fathers. So basically the idea is, here is who I am with, my birth chart. This is me. This is who I consider myself. I'm working on putting together my thoughts on that. And from there, I'm going to go into, here's where I came from. I am the daughter of, and then list the fathers. I am the daughter of, and list the mothers. I would love to do something like that as a mini genealogy to show where I've come from. I have my Seed of Life printout here. I was using it on my altar. I don't currently have a grid that I have set up that I'm working with, so I just put it in here for safekeeping. And eventually with the Book of Shadows, I would also like to have pages like this that can act as a grid within the book, so an active part of the book that I can just open to this page and set it up on top of here, and I am connecting with my book that way. So that's that. Laws, my army values. I put a lot of stock into values, and the army values associate very well, for the most part, with my own personal and family values. So I have them in here because I want to rework some of the information and see how it relates to me personally, and basically write out my own values sheet. Then I have the Witch's Creed because I like it. I also have the Wiccan Read because I like it. So many people at this point pause and say, well, I have this, but I don't consider myself Wiccan, and then they go into this long spiel. My idea is this: if it resonates with you, go with it. Whether or not I consider myself Wiccan is a moot point. It doesn't really matter to me if the words make sense. So I have it in there. Then I have the 13 Principles of Wiccan Belief, and this is copied out and mainly for reference. This does not resonate as well with me. The concepts do. It's just the way it's written, it doesn't sit as poetic with me, so I will probably not include this in my actual Book of Shadows when I get it put together. And then we go into rituals. This is Elements of Teutonic Ritual, just a basic outline. I have additional information for beginning the rituals that I haven't typed out yet. And all of this would be the portion that is traditionally copied out by coven members. So that's why I do not have an issue with having printed out stuff in here that I will later basically copy out, more or less for verbatim. Now what I am doing for each of the actual blots, each of the actual rituals, this is Mutternacht or Mother Night. I am copying them out and then revising them to reflect my own personal beliefs and what I want to do for the holiday, because I'm not part of a coven. Many of these are written to be done in a group, and so I have to alter it to be feasible for a solitary practice. And so that is as far as the changes go. Some of these change a lot, depending on if it's a holiday that I have a lot of input for, a lot of personal interest in, then it may change a lot. If not, if it's a minor holiday and there's not a whole lot that I feel connected specifically to in it, then I won't change a lot. I stayed on this page just because I also wanted to point out I have a page on ritual bathing, a ritual bath, and I included that here before the rituals just because I like things ordered that way. So here we have Mother Night, and this goes into Yule. And then each of these tabs is another one of the holidays. And there are still a couple, and by the way, all of these that I've completed and for myself, I do have available on my little website blog and that is linked below. And I make them available because it's not my original work. The work that it came, well, some of it is my original work, but what it came from is available free online. So if any of you think that looking at these as a reference will be helpful, please do so. You're welcome to. That's why I put them up for you. I also put some of my spells, my spell work, up on the website. And I try to update that periodically. All right, so getting to the end of, see this one, Winter Nights, this one I made a lot of changes to. This is very different from the original, and it is the most involved ritual that I've got because it's very important to me. And then also included in rituals, this is not one of the sabbats, but this is the outline for a formal military missing man table and honor ceremony. I have this in here because I do a version of this for myself at Veterans Day and Memorial Day. So I have that in there and it hasn't been revamped yet. All right, and then here I have sabbats for moon work. As noted potentially before, I think I mentioned it, there's not a whole lot of moon lore associated with ancestry, with the Norse tradition. And they don't have, this pantheon, this tradition does not have a female moon goddess. They have a moon god. So this was kind of difficult for me, and the way I got around it was I just consider moon worship kind of a separate item. I do this how I want to, with a very highly Wiccan bent, but that's how I have it set up right now. So this does not have a whole lot in it right now. I have a full formal sabbat ritual that is pretty lengthy, and I very rarely do a full formal ritual, but I like having it here available. And what I've decided to do with this section, actually, is I want to include, this is the full moon ritual, I want to include a new moon ritual, probably something related to those new moon wishes that I had mentioned in another video. And then also a red moon ritual, meaning basically okay, there's no polite way to say it, I guess. Basically a menarche ritual. I'm a woman. I want to celebrate that, and so I want to also include a red moon ritual or a moontide ritual. This is Hijo de la Luna, one of my favorite songs, actually, dealing with the moon. And I do randomly put in this type of thing in my Book of Shadows because I use songs and poetry and stories, things that I find in ritual and spell work when I can. This was another item related to that female energy, observing the moontide, and this is the witch's mikvah, my take on the Jewish tradition of a woman having to bathe to cleanse herself after her period. So, and this was something that came up as an interest of mine when I was teaching at Orthodox Jewish high schools for girls. So I was trying to work through that and how I view some of these traditions. All right, a little bit of artwork there. And that actually is going to be, it's associated with a story that I need to write, and I'll tell you more about that when I do the video on my Moontide journal that I'm planning to do. Okay, and then here I have information about the moon. This is not information about the moon, but it got printed together. So about the moon phases, and I put this here because I do want to include additional information about the moon phases and how I work with them. I just don't have anything written up by myself yet. And then I do have a couple, this might just be one, but I know I have a couple more moon rituals that I did as buds that I did in the past that I liked, so these are in here as well.